The Chargers have a ton of giant needs heading into the offseason, but could they still try to pursue Davante Adams, or could they use their first round pick on a wide receiver?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeler, and we've been covering the Chargers for over 6 seasons, but we're going into our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. What's up, guys? Welcome into the show. Thank you for making us your first listen. As always, make sure to go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and follow the show for free on all platforms. But on today's show, we wanted to make it a Fan Friday, so we appreciate you guys sending in your voicemails, which you can get to at 323-524-7924, and also sending us some Twitter questions as well, because you guys came through with the content. We have a lot of good conversations to be had today, including, could the Chargers actually take a wide receiver at 17 if they let Mike Williams go? And Mike Williams, Davante Adams, and Keenan Allen, there is a one pipe dream we have to get into as well. But we'll also be talking about what Kenneth Murray is at this point and how to feel about that situation going forward, how much we trust Tom Telesco with the cap space that he currently has, and much more. But David, let's start here with a question from Tito. No, we'll go Tito after this. I actually want to get to a Twitter question first, one that sparked a conversation between us before the show, and it was Zach on Twitter who asked, if the Chargers don't re-sign Mike Williams, then what round do you take a wide receiver in the draft? Personally, I want them to take a receiver at 17. So this is an interesting conversation, Dave, because obviously what the Chargers do in free agency is going to decide a lot of this, right? Because if they bring back Mike, we'll know. But in this hypothetical situation, we'll assume that the Chargers don't go out and get, an Allen Robinson or a DJ Shark or something like that, and they're going into the draft with Josh Palmer, Jalen Guyton, and Keenan Allen as your main 3 receivers. So if you're in that situation, David, do you consider a first-round wide receiver?
I think that's really, really difficult for me, honestly. Yeah. I mean, that's just a position that, although if Mike Williams is not re-signed by the Chargers, it is something that's a concern. I just think there's more important concerns on the roster that need to be fixed before a receiver is taken. Now, I understand we've seen some examples, even recently, of receivers coming in, Jamar Chase, and completely transforming an entire offense and making them look completely different and much more of a threat for sure. But I think the Chargers really need to focus on correcting their run defense, and that should be the number one thing they go in to fix. If it's not run defense and getting a defensive tackle, it's getting a right tackle to protect Justin Herbert. I just think those are the 2 most important things that need to be addressed. Now, obviously, we'll have to see how the draft shakes out and who's available and what the best value is and what the best player available is and all that. But just as an overarching kind of concept, I just don't ever like taking a receiver in the first round.
You just don't like taking a receiver in the first round in general, or just because of the Chargers' specific needs? Like, that's just your general draft philosophy is don't take one in the first round?
Well, as the team is currently constructed right now.
That's a big difference.
Allow me to reiterate,
Yes,
as the team is constructed right now, I just don't see it as the biggest need. So it wouldn't be my favorite thing in the world if they took a receiver in this year's draft in the first round.
Well, and the thing is, too, is that your biggest need is not always going to be the best player that falls to you, right? Then it becomes a philosophy thing, and you have to, are you going to take the player that fits your biggest need, or are you going to take the best player available? Every GM is going to tell you that they're taking the best player available.
Sure.
Sometimes it's worked out where the Chargers get Rashawn Slater at 13, and both,
And Asante Samuel Jr. in the second round, yeah.
Exactly. So sometimes it lines up that way, but a lot of times it doesn't, right?
Right.
So you're defensive tackle might be the biggest need that the Chargers have. It doesn't mean that there's going to be a defensive tackle at 17 that's worth using that
for
kind
sure.
of, if you can get a game-changing wide receiver or a game-changing edge rusher, and we'll talk about, what is a bigger need for the Chargers, right tackle or run stuffer later on with a different voicemail that we'll get into. But in this specific scenario, it would be hard for me to pass up on someone like Jameson Williams, even though with the torn ACL, just what he would bring to the Chargers offense. Obviously, you don't have Mike Williams in this
Yeah, that
situation.
dude's dynamic for sure.
You would get the deep threat plus a guy who can create after the catch a little bit with that game-changing speed and just how good he was. Obviously, a big one-year wonder type of player coming off of a torn ACL, but that's obviously not what it used to mean, right? As far as what that means for that player projecting for them going forward. Chris Olave is another dude who's a special wide receiver. I'll be interested to see what the 40 time is on that one. And then Traylon Burks, just a big, giant yards after the catch, monster breaking tackles left and right would be another guy that I've been looking at in the first round. Even if you brought Mike Williams back, if you added Jameson Williams to that situation, that becomes a pretty dynamic offense. I mean, then you're kind of going into the Bengal situation. I mean, he's not Jamar Chase, right? Nobody is.
Right.
That dude's been a generational special talent this season. But it does give you that dude that can take a catch that's 3 yards and take it to the house, right? That is something that he brings to the table, which is very enticing. Still, I mean, that wouldn't be my first choice. I'm going, if there's a great corner that you like there, I'm taking that first. If there's a great edge that you like there, I'm taking that first. You know, before I get to those other things, you know, and the frivolous, you know, pick of a wide receiver. But Tom Telesco has obviously surprised us in the past. So I do want to get into some voicemails as well, because it is Fan Friday and we have a lot to get into. So sorry, Tito, I pushed you a little later into the first segment. Let's hear what Tito has for us.
This is Tito from South Central Los Angeles, Supercharger fan. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what if we re-sign Mike Williams and go out for Davante Adams. So then we have the trio, Mike, Davante, and Keenan, because you know the best defense is a better offense. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Love the show.
Well, I mean, if you ask the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, it would be hard to disprove them, right? Because like, they just went up against the number one defense in the NFL and the Buffalo Bills, and it didn't mean much because they ended up still getting run over and gave up, points with 13 seconds left. And there's a lot of reasons for that we won't get into, but there is something to trying to keep up and just having a dynamic offense in this specific conference. But it's not going to happen with Davante Adams and Mike Williams.
No.
As much as, just because, I mean, Davante Adams is out there asking for 25 to 30 million, you know, so it'd be a conversation. Even if it was letting Mike Williams walk, it would still be unlikely that the Chargers bring in Davante Adams. I mean, it just, you can't see it right now with Keenan Allen making 20 million. Then if you have Mike Williams, even if you got him on the cheaper side of what's been projected at like a 16 million, and then start paying Davante Adams close to 25 million, you're looking at $60 million on the books just in your wide receiver. So taking advantage of Justin Herbert's contract window, like we'll get into later on, is something where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you load up on certain things, you give out bigger contracts because of that. But unfortunately, it's just not if they could get both, David, but even the one just Davante Adams is probably a pipe dream.
Yeah, I mean, as tantalizing as it may be to think about having Davante Adams, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams on the same field at the same time, that's just simply exactly what it is. It's a dream. There's no GM in football that would go along with that type of roster construction where you have that amount of money tied up into 3 players. It's not going to happen. You really just don't see that ever in the NFL because it's crippling. And more times than not, it really will put you in a situation to where you can't handle other needs that you really necessarily need to. And the Chargers have other contracts they're going to have to dole out this offseason, with guys that they need to bring back into the fold that are, their own players. And obviously they need to go address a couple other players. So you just have to weigh the risk versus reward of bringing in one of the best receivers in football if it's just Davante Adams versus addressing maybe 2 or 3 other potential needs with that same amount of cap space. So those are the type of decisions that GMs have to make all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be really nice. Davante Adams, arguably the best receiver in the league.
Dude's a monster. No
He's
question
not
about it.
necessarily a burner that's going to take the top off the defense, but he isn't, a really good deep ball receiver. Not in the same way as Mike Williams, but just by positioning, late hands to the ball. Such a great connection with Aaron Rodgers, which would be hard to replicate as well, to put up those kinds of numbers, and has some injury issues that he's dealt with as well. So you don't want 25 million dead dollars on your books either. Not to, throw shade at him for getting injured. It's just, if you're giving out that kind of money, you better make sure that dude's going to be on the field. It better be a very durable player, obviously. But David, I think the Chargers also have to worry about some of the guys and what their roles are going to be going forward that are still on the team, because there's a lot of questions there and a lot of the needs the Chargers have to address will be based on the evaluations of the guys they currently have on the roster and the guys that are coming back. So coming up after this, we're going to keep Fan Mail Friday going and get into some more user voicemails and also some fan questions from Twitter too. And specifically, what happens with Kenneth Murray now? Is he a bust already? Only 2 seasons in his career. So we'll get into that coming up after this. But first, I need to tell you guys about an app that all of our listeners should have already, and that is the Get Upside app. If you guys go get gas at the gas pump, right? You need to get the Get Upside app because you guys can be saving money today. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. All you have to do is download the free Get Upside app from the App Store or the Google Play Store, and you guys can use it right now. And since you listen to this show, you can even get an additional saving from the show, because if you use the promo code touchdown, all caps, one word, you can get 25 cents or more on your first fill up. I mean, you can take some money off of the egregious gas prices, guys. And especially if you're a rideshare driver, a food delivery driver, you can save hundreds of dollars a year with the Get Upside app. All you have to do is download the free app, guys. Use the promo code touchdown so you can get up to 25 cents or more on that first fill up. And there's no downside to Get Upside. You can get the money back directly into your bank account. You can get it through PayPal. You can also get it in big gift cards like Amazon and other big brands as well. There's no reason to not be saving money right now at the gas pump, guys, with the Get Upside app. Make sure you use the promo code touchdown to save 25 cents or more on that first fill up. I also need to tell you guys about the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and that's betonline.ag. And BetOnline is the number one place for all sports action. I mean, even if you want to hit your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is the only place to go. And there might be less football being played right now, but BetOnline has way more stuff to bet on the playoffs this season. It's getting way more in-depth. There's so many different prop bets that you can go on these games. And I don't know about you guys, but I love prop bets. Like Super Bowl comes around, I'll be betting on, coin toss, Gatorade color, whoever the coach is, is he going to get a Gatorade bath? Like the whole thing. Like I'm going to bet on the weirdest stuff once the playoffs come, and BetOnline allows me to do that. And that's what I love about them. And I also love that when you sign up and you go to the new updated website, you guys can get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code LOCKEDON. Make sure you use the promo code LOCKEDON so they know that we sent you, all caps, one word, for free money to play with. The only thing better than betting on the Super Bowl is betting on the Super Bowl with house money. And you can do that with betonline.ag. Check out all the different tournaments and great prizes they have coming up for the rest of the playoffs and for the Super Bowl. And you guys can find all the action that you're looking for, whether it's NBA, UFC, NHL, football, even baseball when it comes back. They have it on everything because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, David, let's push through here and get into some more Fan Friday stuff, because we guys obviously came through with the content today, and we'd love giving you guys the platform to tell us what you guys want to hear about. So let's go to Jim from Virginia Beach and hear what he has for us this time.
From Virginia Beach again. Just wondering, what are we to make of Kenneth Murray? We expended or gave up a lot of assets to move up in the draft to take him. And he had, I guess, a typical rookie year. But this year seems to have been an unmitigated disaster, both at inside linebacker and at edge rusher. Why do we think this happened? Was it injury? Was it COVID related? Was it an inability to grasp the intricacies of Brandon Staley's defense? And do we think he can be salvaged, or is he just going to be a total draft bust? Thanks.
Well, I think that's a great question from Jim. I think it's a very well thought out, well articulated, question there, because we've thought all those same things, right? The rookie year, you're like, okay, that's okay. It's very hard to transition into the NFL as a linebacker. It's just really, really tough to. It's a hard position to change, to have that kind of change in. But now we're going into year 3, and he's coming off of a worse season. And that's the tough part, David, is there's a lot of reasons it could happen, but you don't want to see that kind of regression. So then you look at all the reasons it could come from, when really it's probably a mix of all 3.
Yeah, we know that he was dealing with the ankle injury most of the year. We do know that he had his bout with COVID. And we also know that he's going into a completely new defense that he's having to learn that, like we've said multiple times on the show, is a lot more difficult to learn and a lot more moving parts and a lot more techniques than the previous defense that he was in. So I just think that, with Kenneth Murray, at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. The first 2 years that you've seen from Kenneth Murray, it hasn't been good enough. It's just as simple as that. Whether he's been out with injuries or whether it's been his play on the football field, it's not been that same type of athletic sideline to sideline type of linebacker that we saw in college. So this right here in year 3 for Kenneth Murray is make or break. I mean, it's really as simple as that. If he can't show that progression in year 2 of this defense, and hopefully some additions around him, if they get a defensive tackle that can really plug up and really take on double teams and really allow the linebackers to flow a little bit more freely, then we might see a different version of Kenneth Murray. But obviously, we're going to have to see how that happens and see what the Chargers decide to do with their moves. But yes, Kenneth Murray needs to go out there and show who he really is. And if he is not capable, then I think year 3 might honestly be the last year Kenneth Murray is with the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because all his contract's guaranteed. It's not a ton of money, but like you don't save anything by letting him go. All you save is a roster spot. And I mean, if everyone was confused, with what David said, I mean, he said Kenneth Murray's a bust. You heard it here first. David Droegemeler says Kenneth Murray's a bust. He wouldn't be the only one saying that.
You're putting words in my mouth here.
But I think the tough thing with Kenneth Murray is it's hard to see how he gets better because, yes, I mean, the ankle injury, I mean, he wasn't getting to plays that, he should have been making tackles downfield. That was happening before the ankle injury, right? And he did have some stuff in camp. We don't know how much that was lingering, but he played to start the season and then went out and it was a whole thing, right? So it's tough. You don't know how much COVID affected him because we saw COVID affect some players, none at all. And then like a guy like Linval Joseph, he never really seemed the same after he came back from the COVID list. So it's hard you can't really quantify that. But you also did see a Kazir White have his best season in Brandon Staley's defense. So obviously he picked it up well, right? Drew Tranquill, probably not the season I think a lot of people hoped for. He dealt with some things as well, but it didn't seem like he wasn't picking up the defense. Right. Kenneth Murray was just slow to read and react to certain plays. And that's the thing I think is the most troublesome. I'm not going to blame him for not being an edge defender. He's not an edge defender.
Right. Yeah, not at all.
He's not big enough. He doesn't have the skill set or the whole skill set that you need. Yeah, he can rush. Maybe he could get a lot better at that. But as far as being a linebacker, being able to shed blocks, being able to read and react to what's in front of you, that's just something that worries me a lot more. So it's just hard for me to envision right now Kenneth Murray getting a lot better. I'm not going to write him off yet. The only thing I hope is that you don't force him on the field if it just continues to not work. Because I think that would be the bigger problem is just like, are you just going to keep forcing him onto the field if it's not the right fit in your defense? If he just
don't play the favorites, don't put him on the football field because you're Tom Telesco and you have to try to give him every opportunity to make you right in the decision that you made. If it's not what's best for the football team, then I'm sorry, I sound like Mike McCoy here. I don't want to provide any flashbacks for anybody, but if it's not the best thing for the defense, then Kenneth Murray shouldn't be on the field. I mean, the biases and the politics aside.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be. It can't be a political thing. It just has to be because he's the best player, and we didn't see that at every time this season. I think that's kind of the part that's a little concerning. But let's hear what Matt from San Diego has as we keep this Fan Friday going.
This is Matt, born and raised in San Diego. Broke my heart when they went to L.A., but what are you going to do? What do you think is the number one goal in the draft? A run stopper or a dominant right tackle? Thanks for the time, and go Bolts.
Well, Matt, I mean, I definitely feel you on the San Diego thing. And I mean, obviously that always puts us in a tough position because you never want to come off as a San Diego salty or anything like that. And I think one thing that we do bring as this show is just like getting it for the people who were from San Diego, born and raised there, and the people that had a really hard time with it.
Both of us were born and raised in San Diego, man. So we totally understand it. And were we hurt when that happened? Absolutely. I mean, they were in San Diego for 50 plus years, and that was part of the fabric of our city. So I mean, yes, it was an emotional time, but yeah, they moved. We've moved on. The Chargers are in LA now, and that's just it is what it is.
Yeah, but what I was saying is just that we always try to be open to everyone from San Diego because we get that part of it, while also keeping our arms open to any new fans. And I mean, there's been a ton of new fans as well, so we can appreciate all audiences right now. But getting back to that question, David, I'll let you go first on that. Run stuffer or right tackle as the Chargers' biggest need. Not necessarily what they have to address first in the draft, but what their biggest need is.
It's run defense. You have to fix it. It's the number one issue because it reverberates to everything else that you do on the defensive side. If you're able to stop the run, then everything else that you're going to do is going to be more effective. If you can stop the run, then you're going to be able to rush better, which means you're going to be able to cover better. So it's one of those things that if you fix it, it can really help this defense operate the way Brandon Staley has envisioned it to operate.
Yeah, and I mean what they're doing with their scheme obviously is important too, just because like they're gonna run light boxes. You better have
Right.
the right dudes up front that are gonna
Yeah.
be able to reset the line of scrimmage
Right.
and make teams not want to run the ball or not allow them to run the ball effectively. That's why a Jordan Davis is so appealing.
And when
Just
you say
because
reset the line of scrimmage, that just means you're not letting them get forward. You're kind of controlling what that line of scrimmage is doing, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing with a guy like Jordan Davis is like you might not be getting a 3 down defensive lineman, and that's tough. And we'll get into more of that, as the draft season comes. But like you're
Yeah.
getting some dude who will literally just be a presence and can push
Yeah.
people back and be a reason you're not going to run on 3rd and 1 up the middle just because you don't want to run at that behemoth, right? So there's a
Yeah.
lot there. But if you can know that you're going to lock up the right tackle position for the next 5 years to go along with Rashawn Slater for at least the next 4 years, I think that's what you would do. Whether that guy's going to be there at 17 is a different discussion for another day. But I do think there are some guys there that'll be really appealing to the Chargers because they could represent that opportunity to do that. But we do have more we have to get into on Fan Friday because the show goes to you guys today and you brought a lot of great questions. So coming up next, we'll talk about our faith in Tom Telesco with his salary cap that he has going this year and also talk about our free agent that we don't want the Chargers to bring in. And we'll get into that coming up after this. But I mean, I finally made it to the point where I get to talk about my favorite protein bar on the planet. And of course, I'm talking about Built Bar. I mean, one of the things you guys can do and one of the things Built Bar is great for is you take all the bad stuff out of your house, right? And you replace it with Built Bars. And I'm telling you right now, it's not going to seem fun and you're going to shed a tear as you throw the mini donuts into your trash can. But what I can tell you is you're going to have the next best thing. You're going to have something even better than that because you're going to have something that tastes great and tastes like a candy bar while also something that's good for you and is going to fit on your diet because a lot of New Year's resolutions are going on. I mean, I have a wedding coming up that I have to stay, try to get in shape for. So there's a lot of reasons that I can't have junk food. Built Bars are what get me through because first of all, the flavors. I mean, you're getting candy flavors. It's not, honey oat or something like that, right? You're getting bomb flavors like a peanut butter brownie, a cookies and cream, a coconut almond, a mint brownie. You're going to find something you like. I mean, salted caramel every once in a while. That's what I'm looking for. And they're all 100% covered in chocolate and soft and easy to chew. Because if it didn't taste good, I just wouldn't be able to eat it. It'd be very hard to endorse. But that's the great thing about Built Bars. You're getting those great flavors while also getting something that's loaded in protein. Most of them have, only 4 net carbs, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein while also only having 130 calories. So pretty much fits on every diet. And you're also going to feel like you're cheating on your diet, which is the best part about it. Like you can feel guilty and then also come out of the other side like, oh, wait, I didn't cheat on my diet. I did something good. I did a good thing. That's what you get with Built Bar because they taste great. They're good for you. And you can even save some money because if you guys go to Built.com right now, you guys can save 15% off with the promo code LOCKED15. That's promo code LOCKED15, all caps, one word to save 15% off on your order at Built.com. All right, David, we got to power through some more here because we have not a lot of time and a lot more fan questions to get
Let's
into.
do it.
So let's start with Twitter. We have one of our regular Twitter question askers, Kevin, the Red Dog 88, asking, ESPN had an article about some Saints players potentially being available via trade after Sean Payton retiring, Marshawn Lattimore being one. Probably unlikely, but wonder what your thoughts about that. Would you think that would be a fit? Keep up the great work. So obviously when your head coach retires, suddenly that's going to put you in a pretty tough situation. And the Saints have a terrible cap situation.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's not just that. I mean, they just have no money at all.
But at like the same time, I mean, like Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, I mean, he's one of the best people on the network for sure. Like he always laughs at people when they, talk about the Saints cap situation. Cause like, I think last year they were like $80 million over the cap when free agency started. Somehow they got it done. They extended Marshawn Lattimore to a $100 million extension. They still were able to put a team together that if they had a quarterback, not only would have made the playoffs for sure, right, but would have been a really tough team to get out because that defense is for real. We saw what they've done to Tampa Bay. A lot of the times they've matched up against each other, right? Even with the ghost of Drew Brees playing quarterback, they were still a very, very competitive team, a very well-built team, but a team that's in salary cap hell. I think the short answer here, David, is yeah. I mean, I would love to bring in Marshawn Lattimore. He's one of those few dudes who brings not only just great talent to your team, but also brings a physicality, brings, an attitude that any team I think would like to bring in. And I think Brandon Staley could do a lot with him, even if it doesn't necessarily seem like a great scheme fit. Like, you make it work around that dude. And I actually think he would be a good fit for what Staley wants to do.
Now, I know there are players that you want to look for that will fit your scheme, and you always will look for that, but good players will fit in any scheme, okay? I want to put that out there first and foremost. If you are a talented player, one of the best players at your position, it doesn't matter what scheme you're playing in because your talent is going to win out. You can adhere to the system a lot better, and the coaches are going to use you, and they're going to figure out the best way to use that talent in their defense because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to maximize the good players and use them in their defensive schemes. And Brandon Staley is supposed to be one of the smartest young defensive coaches in the league. So hell yeah, I'd love that. Sign me up. Obviously, also sign me up for Ramczyk, the right tackle too. If they're trying to give players away, I'd be more than happy to take both of those guys because they would be awesome additions to this team.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Jordan's the other guy too, where it's like
Hell
those are
yeah.
the big names and the big money players. I don't know where Cam Jordan lines up in this specific Chargers defense, just because he's kind of an edge player there, but he doesn't really fit like the outside linebacker role that Brandon Staley has. He's not in the Leonard Floyd kind of model or Von Miller or any of those
No.
guys. But he's another dude where it's like, I mean, yeah, you'd think that you could make it work. You'd find a way to use
You
him.
find a way, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's always just like, of course, there's certain players that transcend scheme. That's one
Yeah.
thing, right? But I think the biggest thing is like, are you still going to get what makes that player special if you're not doing what they're so good at right now?
Right.
I think that's always the tough thing to balance. But we do have some more voicemails to get into. I love the questions. I mean, you guys really definitely brought it for us this week. But let's get to Zach from Florida, who always brings it. One of our favorites that he already has for us.
Zach from Florida here. So the big topic of discussion for off-season is going to be about cap space. So right now we have about 75 million, maybe 72 million. But if we release Bulaga, that could add another 10 million. But are you at all worried that with the amount of cap space we're going to get, that we might find a way to not utilize it? Or maybe the better question is, are we going to be able to see Tom Telesco actually go out there and bring us some great pieces and maybe a top name free agent? I feel like with Herbert only taking up 3 to 5% of the cap space right now, that we're going to have so much money to spend. And I just don't want to see an appearance by Coupon Tom. So I'd love to know your thoughts, and go Bolts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we should start off by just the salary cap number of like 72 million. That's pretty much gone now, right? I mean, if you look at it now, it's about 58 million. Daniel Popper put out a good thing in his offseason handbook that kind of explains it and why the number is around 58 million. And it's never as much as it seems, right? Especially, you factor in a Mike Williams franchise tag potentially. Now you're taking 19 million off of that. Obviously, the Bulaga, if you cut him, which seems like almost a no-brainer at this point, that gives you some of it back. Have to keep money for in-season acquisitions, as Tom Telesco loves to do. There's got to be some rollover cap for the next year, right? Got to save some of that money. But I think the larger question here, David, is just, do you trust Tom Telesco to go out and make the right moves and not necessarily the big moves? Because, Zach, I mean, it's hard to say he's not making big moves when he made a dude the highest paid center and brought him in from the Packers last year, right? And gave out a $20+ million deal to Matt Filer, which is another really good deal as well. And like, as much as Tom Telesco, you can't only be the coupon god. Like, being a coupon god is what gets you Casey Hayward, right? It gets you Oday Abushi when he was looking really good before that, and some of the other solid signings that we've seen. So I don't fully trust Tom Telesco with the salary cap situation because I don't know if what you have to hope for is that Brandon Staley being more involved is what led to the success, because he gave out big deals to Chris Harris Jr. and Linval Joseph and also Brian Bulaga as well. He just missed, right, on 2 out of 3 of
players.
Those. Exactly. So I do hope that it is younger players, because like Corey Linsley isn't old for a center. Like, that was a good player. You're betting on the future. I would hope that they sign, if they're going to give big deals out, which I do think they have maybe room for a couple, but not nearly as much as anyone thinks, that they're giving it to younger players that, are part of the vision for the entire future, not just a 2-year Band-Aid or something like that.
Yeah, I think if you asked me this question with the head coaches that were with the Chargers before Brandon Staley, I would vehemently tell you no, I do not trust Tom Telesco at all because the lack of track record. I mean, your job as a general manager is to put together a winning team that is going to win games, win playoff games, and win a Super Bowl. That is your job. And, if that's the criteria, obviously that being very, very loose with that, Tom Telesco has not done his job at a high enough level because the Chargers have not been to the playoffs enough times. So that's a clear indictment on his ability to construct a roster. I mean, I think that's just pretty cut and dry. Now, the one thing we saw with Brandon Staley was the influence, as you mentioned, that he had on some of those signings and some of the players that they drafted. So with Brandon Staley in the fold and kind of seeing his vision in the first year of free agency, the first time he had a chance to kind of build the roster the way he wanted to and get the players that he wanted to bring in. I liked a lot of those moves that he made, and they definitely paid dividends. So I think, Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco is a team that I can endorse.
Yeah, I don't think there were any total busts last year. I mean, I guess Odea Bushi just because he gets hurt, but that was such a small deal
Yeah,
that you understand it. Like Matt Filer, Corey Lindsey, great. Kyler
home
Fackrell,
runs.
I thought he was solid. So
Yeah.
it's not a
Okay.
bad signing. I have more optimism this year than I did last year, kind of like David. I mean, I feel better about it because I know Brandon Staley's in it, and he has an influence there as much as Tom Telesco wants to tell you he's not focused on any of those things. I mean, I think hopefully it's more like last year than it was in 2020, and I do think it will be just because, like, even with the Kenneth Murray thing, like we talked about, that was a total Anthony Lynn type of pick. So we're
Oh,
seeing,
yeah.
how much these guys really do have influence over it. But we have one more voicemail to get into, so let's squeeze in Sean from Boise calling in again.
Sean from Boise here. I just wanted to ask a quick question, see what your guys' thoughts were. And you may have covered this already, but out of all the free agents that are available, who would you not want to see the Chargers bring in to help the team? Love the show, guys. Both up.
What a great question, Sean. That is a great question. Nobody's asked us that. We have not talked about that. We probably should have thought about that for a show, for a segment. So, David, I'll let you go first. I mean, I think this is, I mean, there's not a ton of players on Twitter that are floating around. And I'm like, oh no, do not do that,
Yeah.
But there's definitely a couple guys out there. Who would you go with?
Yeah, I mean, I just saw some people talking about it, and I've heard people talk about it just through the last couple of seasons, I think. And it's, for me, I just don't want any part of the Chargers reuniting with Melvin Gordon. I've seen it a couple of times out there, and Melvin Gordon, we know who he is, the big back. Sometimes he breaks tackles, sometimes he goes down with ankle tackles. We also know he has a big fumbling problem, and that's something that has not really cured itself
Yeah.
from the beginning of his career to now. So I don't want any part of a reunion with Melvin Gordon and the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I haven't seen anyone saying that. I mean, I would be hard pressed to think that he's going to get very much. I mean, I think he's looked better in Denver than most of his years that he was with the Chargers, and he does look like he's running pretty damn hard. But yeah, I haven't seen that one. I wouldn't necessarily want to see that again either. One of the guys I've seen just out of the guys that I think could be impact players would be Jadeveon Clowney, just because I have seen that name floated around. I understand the value of pressure, and he brings a ton of pressure. He's a really, really underrated run defender. So,
Yeah.
I think that is something part of his game where he would help your run defense. But for what the price tag is going to cost, and just for a guy that doesn't really materialize the sacks that he gets close to, as much as I get it, like the analytics and all those things, like, hey, pressure is more important than sack numbers. I agree because I know how much Joey Bosa brings to the table without the elite 15 to 16 sacks a season. I just think out of the other edge rushers, when it's him against Von Miller, him against some of the other guys stacked up in this free agency class, there's other guys I like better. So I understand. Another one would be Odell Beckham, just because, like, first of all, you bring a certain level of drama, but like talent always outweighs drama. You'll bring in pretty much any amount of, like, I don't think Aaron Rodgers, even with all the drama he brought in, is gonna have a hard time finding suitors if they decide, that he wants to be traded. So I mean, to a certain extent, I just don't know if the skill set is what you want to most accentuate what Justin Herbert does well, or that it would automatically translate to what him and Matt Stafford had and him and Eli Manning had early in his career would transfer, or translate to him and Justin Herbert's relationship. But that is a good question. Chargers free agents that we wouldn't want. that's another story that we talked about a little bit. I think it's pretty obvious, but we'll save that for another show. So, David, bite your tongue. But maybe we'll do a stay or go thing, where we just go through, knock them out, stay or go, stay or go. But we're next Monday, which is what I should be talking about because that's the next show. We'll be dropping our first mock draft Monday of the season. So we'll be going through some of the mock draft trackers. We'll see some of the guys and we'll break down some of the guys the Chargers could be selecting in the first round because there's a wide variety of guys that could be there, and that's going to change a lot and a different number of ways that they could go as far as position they decide. I mean, we just talked about wide receiver today. There's a lot of different decisions the Chargers will have to make in the first round. But that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you guys to everyone who contributed to the show. If you want to ask us any question on Twitter, you can hit us up at LockedOnLAC. And you can also call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 so we can get your guys' voicemail on the show. So thank you to everyone who contributed to today's show. We'll be back with you guys on Monday and every day throughout the offseason. But until then, make sure to go subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel if you haven't already, as well as following the show on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it's always on there. And if it ever doesn't show up, you can always find the show on our social media. Find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Droegemeler on Twitter at DroTalkSD, as well as finding the show on our Instagram page at Locked On Chargers and also our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But thank you guys for contributing. Again, we always love doing stuff with the fans, and we're definitely going to continue doing that throughout the offseason. But it's mock draft Monday time on Monday. So back here with us then. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.